Well, good afternoon. Today is the 15th of July 2023 and I'm only going to make this fairly brief. Now, for those who don't know, Ross Coulthart is one of the most respected and trusted journalists in Australia, and indeed is now well known around the world. In this case, on what's happening and has happened in regard to crashed alien spacecraft and bodies, and the retrieval programs that were used and are probably still are used to a degree, I believe, and the secrecy of that and the cover-ups and lies that go with it and so on, and also what is going to be happening fairly shortly, and by that I mean this month, is there's going to be congressional hearings. They have already been in camera, as they call it, secret hearings where the public don't get to see them. But there's going to be public hearings. I'm not sure which committee, whether it's part of the Senate or whether it's probably best that it is the Senate, according to Ross, or the House as a House committee. But something will be held where about half a dozen witnesses to the actual retrieval of craft, the actual reverse engineering of craft, the actual bodies of aliens that are in storage currently, will be under oath, subject to jail if they're found to be lying. So there's a lot to this, and I can see anyone else can. And Ross also was a presenter or a journalist that had stories on 60 Minutes in Australia. For those who don't know, we know about 60 Minutes in the United States and also in Australia. He's written a series of books on the subject of that I've just been discussing. In Plain Sight was one. There's going to be a new version of that in September, updated with some of the things that we've been discussing here. Now, Ross was very much a skeptic on the subject of UFOs, and now called UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Well, big deal, eh? But they decided to change the names on some of these things. And he's just simply a highly accomplished investigative journalist. So he is now completely convinced that as to what's going on. And David Grush was the subject of an interview, and of course he couldn't reveal some of the things that they were still high security, classified to the degree where he couldn't release the information. So he's been straight up and down about that. In other words, he's been given permission to reveal certain things, as I just said. The retrieval programs and the like still exist. Now, as Ross pointed out, if, for example, there were 6 people who gave evidence that a certain person had killed another, shall we say, there'd been a murder, let's say, 6 witnesses testified that indeed Joe Bloggs or whoever had done the crime, it is very likely that a jury would convict that Joe Bloggs, and he'd go to jail for a very, very long time. I mean, I don't know, it depends on which country this happened in. In Australia, you'd probably get 15 to 20 years out of it. In the United States, you might even get the death penalty. The point is that the jury, and therefore the courts, would accept that evidence, would convict on that evidence. Now, these people that are going to come forward who have committed illegal acts. In other words, they'd been sworn to secrecy and they were doing their job by collecting the spacecraft and getting rid of them into hangars and even underground, I guess, but not to be too melodramatic, but it's probably what has happened. And the bodies are put into some sort of chemical and in the containers and so forth. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. Since the 1947 Roswell crash at the very least. And that is too long a story, but if you do the research, you'll find that they they covered that up very poorly, actually, because Stanton Friedman got interested in all this, and he was a physicist, and he got into the subject, shall we say, basically by accident. That he was a nuclear expert and helped to invent laser weapons, laser beams, laser technology, and in fact even perfected a nuclear engine for a spacecraft, which is not used for many years, but then I think will be. In any case, he investigated the Roswell incident and interviewed people who were still alive and explained their parts in the whole issue. He's now passed away, as has another great journalist, Jim Mars, who exposed all of the goings-on of these UFOs, UAP, aliens, etc., etc. Now, if you look at it as, well, if 6 people gave evidence that somebody had committed a murder and that person got convicted, wouldn't you think that when the 6 people come to the Congressional hearing and they give evidence, that's completely accepted, and the question then is, what's next? Well, the public now know that these craft are real. That, oh yes, we go into all sorts of things like mistaken identity, military aircraft, secret military aircraft. Yes, these sorts of things happen. Certainly not as swamp gas, as they used to say, or the planet Venus or whatever. That's all nonsense. But actual craft up close in daylight, sometimes there have been many thousands of people have seen them, and in fact there are so many cases that I could outline. I won't at this stage. Anyone doing research should be welcome to discover all that, and what I hope to do is put a link to this interview. It's very long. It's about an hour and a half, the interview, but if you watch 20 minutes to half hour, put it off for the time being and go away and do something else, in other words, and come back, you'll find that listening to the whole interview is worth your time. Now, I'm hopeful of what is known as full disclosure, and that is to admit that these things have happened, that the lies and cover-ups have occurred, and so on. And ultimately, is it too much for me to ask that I'm one of millions of people who would like to see alien bodies and spacecraft actually brought out on display for scientists, the media and the public to see up close? I just thought I'd have a little bit to say about that now, and let's see how things develop in the coming weeks and months. But I'd certainly welcome any polite and civil comments or questions or discussion on the subject. So thank you for viewing.